now to please introduce our pastor.
Thank you, Chairman Proctor. Good afternoon. We are blessed tonight, Mr. Chairman, to have Reverend Ernest J. Lane in our midst. He is the pastor of the Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church, and he will provide our invocations. So I will ask the audience to please stand now for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend Lane.
Thank you. Let us bow our heads, please. Gracious and loving God, Father of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, we come with bowed heads and humble hearts for this meeting of the Leon County Commissioners today, asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered here together. We pray first and most especially that your sweet, sweet spirit will be among us to guard and guide hearts, words, deeds, actions, and thoughts as the citizens of Leon County are served through these your servants, Cummins, Proctor, Jackson, Minor, Welch, Dozier, and Maddox, their staff and their families. Each day they serve, we ask that you give them wisdom instead of a thirst for power. May you give them thick skins when criticism, fair or not, comes their way. May you remind them each day of the privilege and honor it is to serve this present age they're calling to fulfill. Renew hearts that they will always seek to serve the least, the lost, and the left out among us. May they never hide behind the will and bidding of the powerful and the well-connected. But may they show courage to lead in bold and new ways. May they stand up to the powerful and never be afraid to speak the truth to power. Remind them of your unfailing love for them as your children, and may they feel your unfailing grace and strength throughout all their days. We pray for school children and school administrators, for the faithful and the homeless, for small business owners and healthcare professionals, our law enforcement officers, our institutions of higher learning, civil servants, and all others standing in the need of prayer. Please continue to keep your ever-loving arms of protection around us all as we brave through this pandemic. We give you thanks for these elected and appointed county staff in this room and for all they have done to serve your people. Help us to remember kindness, mercy, and compassion. And when we prepare to leave this place after the assignments today have been taken care of, we pray that your peace will go with us. So having named all of this before us today, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, we make our requests made known unto you, our God, to your glory. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Let us recite now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen. At this time, we welcome Commissioner Dozier to the lower rostrum as she would prepare to present a resolution on behalf of the board.
Yeah. How are you? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am very pleased to welcome Tiffany McCaskill Henderson, formerly of Florida Association of Counties fame. She was one of our many rock stars over there, and current Florida Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. To receive a proclamation today focusing on American Heart Month. As I prepared for today, I reflected on the fact that I often, not this year, but I've done the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we've done cancer. These are three issues, or cancer and heart disease, that affects almost all of us. We know somebody, we have a friend, we have a family member, Heart disease is in my family. And reading through these statistics, it really drives the point home of what a critical issue this is and the incredible work that American Heart and others do. So thank you for being here. The proclamation reads, whereas cardiovascular disease affects men, women, and children of every age and race in the United States. From 2019 to 2020, deaths from heart disease increased 4.8%, the largest increase in heart disease deaths since 2012. And stroke deaths increased during the same period by 6%. Cardiovascular disease continues to be the leading cause of death in the U.S. And whereas in 2015, cardiovascular disease accounted for $555 billion in healthcare expenditures and lost productivity. And by 2035, cardiovascular disease will account for more than $1 trillion in healthcare expenditures and lost productivity annually. And whereas the global COVID-19 pandemic poses significantly high risk to individuals with cardiovascular disease and other risk factors. And whereas individuals in the U.S. have made great progress in reducing the death rate for cardiovascular disease, but this progress has been more modest with respect to the death rate for cardiovascular disease in women and minorities. And whereas cardiovascular diseases are the #1 killer of women in the U.S., killing more women than all forms of cancer combined. And cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of maternal death in the U.S., or more simply put, heart disease is the #1 killer of new moms. And whereas women, especially Black and Hispanic women, are disproportionately impacted by heart disease and stroke, and research shows heart attacks are on the rise in younger women. Yet younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, are less likely to be aware of their greatest health threat, including knowing the warning signs of heart attacks and strokes. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Leon County that in recognition of the importance of the ongoing fight against heart disease and stroke, February 2022 is designated American Heart Month. And we urge all Leon County citizens to show their support for the fight against heart disease by increasing awareness, speaking out about heart disease, and empowering others to reduce their risk for cardiovascular disease. It's dated today, the 8th day of February 2022, and signed by the chairman and all the commissioners and the county administrator. Thank you, Tiffany, for your work. Appreciate it. Yes, here you go.
I would like to thank Commissioner Dozier. Thank you, commissioners, for your support. As Commissioner Dozier read, heart disease continues to be the leading cause of death. And through awareness, and we can definitely fight against that through educating people on prevention and treatment, and hopefully leading to longer, healthier lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Now we move, commissioners, into our consent agenda. Are there any items that have been withdrawn, Mr. Administrator?
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item number 8 has been pulled from consent by Commissioner Welch.
Okay. Commissioners, we've had item number 8 that has been withdrawn. Can we get a motion for those items which remain on consent? Moved and second by Commissioner Maddox, second by Commissioner Dozier, that we move the consent item with the exception of number 8. All in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, it passes unanimously. Agenda item number 8, would you tee it up, Mr. Administrator, and Commissioner Welch, we'll hear from you.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I should note we have a couple of speakers on this item. Commissioners, as the item details, you've received a status report on the various efforts related to the Lake Hall School preservation. We're happy to answer any questions at this time on this. Again, it talks about how several of the previous efforts that have involved the Florida Forever and the FCT have come up a little short. Again, we would continue to support efforts through legislative requests, either at the state or the federal level for such a thing, but there are some very significant obstacles with respect to ultimately the acquisition of this property, not the least of which is unwilling sellers. And so, again, we articulate the obstacles involved. We're happy to receive your direction, however, and at this point, staff is recommending option 1.
Okay. Mr. Administrator, you mentioned that someone had come up a little short. How much is a little short? How do you define a little short, some fallen shortness?
Commissioner, there's a lot to that question. You have the property itself, but the property itself and the acquisition of that is only a part of the issue here. Access to the site would also be a considerable cost factor as well. I mean, all total, ballpark, I mean, you're looking at in excess of probably $1 million to get to a place where you have constructive control of the property. And again, that would not be through a traditional willing seller sale. Again, this item articulates the legal option of an eminent domain, and certainly the county attorney is better prepared to discuss that. But obviously, since at this point we're not dealing with willing sellers for the property itself, that would be something that we would have to contemplate as part of this moving forward, if that's the board's direction.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, I wanted you to, for all of us to understand what a little short meant. And in real estate, in this instance, it's $1 million. Commissioner Welch.
Thank you, Chairman Proctor. Do we want to hear from any of the speakers, Mr. Administrator, first, or shall I carry on?
Go ahead, Mr. Administrator.
We have 3 speakers, Commissioner. We'll start with one speaker joining us via Zoom is Max Epstein.
Hello.
Mr. Epstein, please state your name and address for the record.
This is Max Epstein, 1001 San Luis Road. Commissioners, I would encourage you to use your powers of eminent domain to preserve and allow access to the public for this important cultural resource. As you know, I am not a big fan of using eminent domain and very sensitive to it, but this property is extremely important. Commissioner Welch, I was reading about your in the Tallahassee Democrat, and the county does have the power to do this. The county does have a lot of leeway, and the power of eminent domain has been used hundreds of times for hundreds of parcels, maybe not going to court, but over 100 parcels were acquired for FAMU Way. Parcels are being acquired, unwilling sellers for the Northeast Gateway, the airport gateway, and every other infrastructure project that I can think of has required its use. This is an appropriate use of eminent domain. We need to be seeing this more. And a quick search of Google shows that 4664 Thomasville Road, the parcel that would be needed to access this from Thomasville Road, as the surrounding property owners would like, is for sale. You would not have to use eminent domain. It's for sale right now for $425,000. You could even turn that into a welcome center and have a parking lot. And it would be an asset for the county that could be resold if you would like. That means your power of eminent domain would only be for the structure and about 10 feet around it, and it abuts this parcel. There is plenty of funding out there from the state there and the federal level. The National Park Service right now is doing a big push to preserve Black history, African American history in America. Wouldn't it be great to have the National Park Service involved in this? So I know my thoughts have not been too put together here, but you really should look at acquiring the parcel that is for sale, acquiring the school through eminent domain, and just think about using this power to preserve our cultural and environmental features. This power can be used for it. If this were a stormwater pond, it would already be done. There wouldn't be a question. So please consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Epstein. County Administrator, who's our next speaker?
The next speaker, Shelby Green.
Ms. Green, good afternoon. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm going to take my mask off. My name is Shelby Green, and my address is 519 Ingleside Avenue. And I'm here today to support the acquisition and restoration of the Lake Hall Schoolhouse. I know this is a difficult situation where the property owners are unwilling possibly to negotiate, but I do think this board should use its power to highlight the hidden history of Leon County. This month, to celebrate Black History Month, I've created a digital calendar, and every day of the month I am showcasing history, particularly Black history in Leon County and Tallahassee. And while I've been sharing this calendar with the public, there's children and adults that I've spoken to that had no idea that this history even existed. And so I think it is important that this schoolhouse is not allowed to be used as an abandoned shed. And I believe that the county should do what's in its power to provide to the public an educational opportunity for people to know that before there were suburbs, that these were plantations, and the people that worked on these plantations did not have an opportunity after emancipation to own the land and maintain the land in their family for years to come. So I encourage the county to use its power to bring this structure back to the public and to encourage the public to engage in a segment of history that has been lost and ignored for a portion of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Administrator, who's our next speaker?
The final speaker on this item, Geraldine C.
Greetings, Dr. C. We welcome you. Ask for your name and address.
Jerry C., 2014, Chulinini. As you know, I've been working on this project about 3 years or so, and we were successful in having it placed on the local register, which gives it protection from being torn down. The owners signed their permission to move toward the historic preservation designation. However, once we started moving toward finalizing that and beginning to plan for public, there was some resistance and continues to be some. We've sent several different people to talk to them, including the realtor that Max mentioned, the property at 4664 Thomasville Road. She's spoken with, tried to speak with the owners. Just a few minutes ago, the developer who has put together quite a bit of housing on Lake Hall Road spoke to the owners this morning. They quoted him $300,000 to buy their home and the school. The school sits 3/4 on their lot and 1/4 on the lot next to them. Here's the thing. There have been several grant opportunities. I know $1 million was mentioned, but there have been several grant opportunities that we have not been able to pursue because we don't own the property. The federal government had a $1 million grant with a $250,000 match for African American historic properties. The state park system has a $2 million
amount of money that they give to create parks and to buy property and preserve those properties for public use. So there's quite a bit of money out there, but we're stymied because we just don't own the property. Here's the thing, everybody says it's inaccessible, but you have to remember that inaccessibility was a part of the plan. In 1870, schools were not necessarily things that the majority of the owners of the plantations wanted to have. And so naturally, freed slaves who had purchased this land that we're speaking of put a school on their property that they had just bought from the plantation owner after the Civil War. And they put the school there on that land that they had purchased from one of the plantation owners. And yes, it is inaccessible in some way, but remember that's a part of that history. I look forward to any questions you might have, and I'm in hopes that you'll look at this as an opportunity to save something that's priceless. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. C. Commissioner Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I pulled the item for a couple reasons. One is I wanted to thank staff for, a very comprehensive analysis and status update of kind of where we're at on this. I know that a lot of people have been involved in this issue for many, many years, including staff and members of the public and Dr. C and students at FAMU. And I agree with what our speakers said. I think we should do everything in our power to preserve the safety of this property. Now, I recognize there are challenges. And my second reason for doing this was really to just explore that we as a board of county commissioners have done everything absolutely possible that we can do to secure this property. And that includes this, I know we don't like to talk about eminent domain. Now, I understand there are challenges there too. So what I want to do, and I would support that, I'm just going to say it. I would support seeking eminent domain to preserve this property. This building is being used as a shed. It's got paint thinner and paint in it. I know we have a historic overlay over it, but it could go up in flames at any time. It's a matchbox. We're talking about redrawing a boundary line around this building to ensure its preservation and protection. Because I think it's that important. I think that it is, as a school teacher and a county commissioner, this kind of is double important to me because the value historically and educationally and culturally and socially is immense. So I just want to make sure, because I had not seen eminent domain mentioned until I saw the status report, as used in this way consistent with historic preservation. I would support that. I would support exploring that. Maybe we explore it and we realize it's not feasible, it's not possible, it's too expensive. There's always going to be reasons to say no. I want us to make sure that we have examined every possibility of saying yes. So what I would like to do is, I'm not going to make a motion. I would just like to hear from my colleagues about whether you're willing, if you think it's a good idea, or better yet, before I even hear from you guys, I would like to hear from the county attorney, because I want to make sure everybody up here and out in the audience, everybody understands what the obstacles are. And the county administrator, county attorney, they acknowledge there are a lot of obstacles, and I get it. I just want to make sure that we are aware of the reality of the situation as it sits currently. I think there are avenues outside of eminent domain to facilitate this transaction. I don't necessarily think it would be $1 million. I think there are less expensive options. So my biggest concern is that we have explored every option that we as policymakers sitting on a county commission can do to preserve the property, because a lot of work's gone into it. It is unquestionably important to our community, unquestionably. And we owe that building and the people who occupied it this thorough vetting as a board of county commissioners. So I feel passionately about at least doing everything that we really, really reasonably can do.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Welch. Madam County Attorney, that was a wide question. I want to narrow it. I want to ask Commissioner Cummings in particular. I'm thinking about the easement. And doesn't Florida require a property that is encased and surrounded by others to provide an easement and not necessarily the government? Suppose we were not the government. Suppose this was not the government, it was a private person. Wouldn't they have a right to an easement, and wouldn't that be cheaper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you negotiated a cooperative purchase of the property, you would need to also acquire an easement for access purposes. Now, if you're going to exercise eminent domain, you are going to also have to acquire by eminent domain sufficient property for access. Now, there are any number of things to consider related to that. If you have access directly off of Thomasville Road and you can acquire that without eminent domain, that's not a consideration for the process of eminent domain. If you do not acquire access directly off of Thomasville Road, then you will need to consider when you are acquiring access, whether that's an easement, fee, whatever the property interest is, that for that property to be accessible to the public, it needs to meet county standards. And right now, there's off of a county-maintained road, a private road, and that is effectively what leads to the driveways of the couple of residences in that area. It is a one-lane road currently that would not be sufficient for public access to a property that was acquired by eminent domain for a public purpose. But this is why, if you are considering utilizing the eminent domain process, you would need to do what Blueprint does frequently when we are acquiring by eminent domain or the county, and that is you would need to retain a consultant to evaluate the options related to the acquisition of that parcel, whether it's partially by voluntary purchase, by the exercise of eminent domain. They would give you those options, talk about feasibility. They would talk about the public purpose and necessity. There are legal tests that you have to meet in order to exercise that eminent domain power. And those are all things that the board would need to, if you want to take that step, authorize a consultant to evaluate the options and bring that back to the board. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Commissioner Cummings, you have any specific thoughts which might differ? Agree with?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the presenters as well as our county administrator for the summary that we have on this particular issue. And I certainly am in favor of preservation of the schoolhouse and just preservation of history in general. But I want to follow up and just ask a question from Dr. C's presentation, unless I heard it wrong. I believe she said that one of the property owners had been approached, and as late as, I thought she said this morning or this week, they indicated they would sell their property for $300,000. So, Mr. Chair and County Administrator, is that something worth pursuing? And if the purchase of one piece of property, would that provide enough property to do what needs to be done as far as that schoolhouse structure?
Thank Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, and thanks. And I realize this was a consent item, so it didn't really have the full introduction that sometimes we have on these items. And I just wanted to say, if I could back up for just a quick second on this, that for those who may just be hearing this the first time and that sort of thing, certainly the board has been very, very supportive of this project. And we've, as you all know, it's been to you several times, and we have explored things like moving the building and moving it to parkland. It was, as the item says, it wouldn't make the trip in terms of the condition of the house itself, in terms of demolishing or rebuilding it and that sort of thing. We've done some engineering analysis, and that just wouldn't happen. And so again, we're at the point now of, would it be possible to acquire through voluntary acquisition the site? We've explored that. As we note in the item, we've explored other partnerships and other granting partners. I believe the TPL had a sort of money in hand, if you will, at appraised value for the site itself, which was declined. I'm not sure if there was a number that was brought up here. I'm not sure if that's the appraised price or if that is something more than that. I just don't have that information at this period, at this point in time. But certainly, you have the costs of the acquisition itself, and then you have the cost of providing access, which is the much bigger number. Cost of access would be to acquire properties either off Thomasville Road, and it was noted that there's a property for sale off Thomas Road. There certainly is. I think it's approaching about $500,000. Again, that's really not the big cost as far as we're concerned. And again, this is just for the board's consideration. Certainly, there would be roads that would need to be constructed. There'd be stormwater facilities associated with the roads. There'd be parking. There'd be all of those things. So again, just, high level, we're talking, as the item says, considerable numbers, I think. So I just I want to provide that clarification. So we're not just talking about the cost of the acquisition for the schoolhouse itself. I should also note that we've engaged up to this point several associations in town and nonprofits and museums and that sort of thing who have noted that, and while everybody agrees with the importance of the site, they have noted that similar properties of similar periods and similar uses are in permanent display in Leon County today. At the Tallahassee Little Museum and that sort of thing. And so while we've engaged with the state parks and others, as the item talks about, as well as the Tallahassee Museum and others, there have not been partner agencies who've expressed a desire to work with us on something like that as well. So with all that, I hope I provided that clarification, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up?
Yes, ma'am.
So just for clarification, Mr. County Administrator, purchasing one lot, and I know we have two pieces of property that encroach the schoolhouse, but purchasing one piece of property would satisfy some aspect of ownership, but not the access to the property. Is that what I hear?
That's correct.
So whether the properties are secured through eminent domain or voluntary sales, there will still need to be some action as far as access to the schoolhouse. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And that's what's driving the price up for
That's
the
correct.
estimated $1 million that we saw.
Yes, Commissioner.
And
Thank
then Commissioner Cummings, on top of that, the county attorney has said we would have to build a road to public standard. That has not been factored. So you're adding, if we eminent domain the property, we would also, because it's a public road, would have to, and I mean, imagine that's another little small amount, maybe $1 million or so, to make it a public DOT sanctioned road. So I'm pondering, well, can we purchase the building and move the building somewhere? And I don't know what the function, if we're going to put this much money, if it's holding paint thinner right now, what would this building do in the future? What are we going to be doing with it? Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't agree with Commissioner Welch anymore and our speakers that it is a valuable link to our history. But if I read it correctly, Mr. County Administrator, correct me if I'm wrong, the neighbors on the privately owned road maintain that they don't want public access through their neighborhood. So would that require an additional eminent domain action. If they say that they don't want that public access on a one-lane privately owned road, then would we be responsible? And not only that, when you look at the cost of the house, I believe sits on 2 parcels. A property line goes between it, but you would have to then purchase surrounding parcels to be able to provide the infrastructure and the facilities to even make it accessible and I think you used up to code type standards. It's a privately owned unpaved road, so I'm wondering if that too would then involve eminent domain. I don't know if that's for you or the county attorney.
Yeah, I'll defer to Chastity on that.
Thank you. And we happen to have our eminent domain specialist, Senior Assistant County Attorney Dan Rigo with us. He has looked at this, so I would like for him to answer that question.
Mr. Rigo, there's no place else for you to punt this ball, so I think you got it.
In my lap, I guess. Yeah, so what was the question from Commissioner Jackson?
Commissioner Jackson, he wants you to repeat that question.
Yeah, I'm talking about the neighborhood that a road would conceivably go through and the additional purchase of parcels that people may not be willing to sell as well that would actually allow one day to have something there.
Right, looking at the map as to where the access would have to go through those neighboring parcels on those what are now private roads, I believe there are at least 3 or 4 additional parcels that we would have to acquire some sort of a easement for ingress, egress, which would then be turn a private drive or private road into a public road going back to the building itself. So yes, there would be additional eminent domain acquisitions needed from them if they weren't willing to
And I'm sure we're not,
sell us an easement otherwise.
I'm not putting the cart before the horse, but we probably don't even know what that allocation or funding would involve additionally. Correct?
No, we don't. But it would be, there would be full compensation to those owners based on the current value of their property, and then any decrease in value to their property that's left coming from now being a public road going through their lots instead of a private road.
So after the Trust for Public Land tried to negotiate purchase of the property, and they were not willing to sell, and they have now indicated a disinterest in continuing to work towards that based on the seller's reluctance. In addition to that, I think the item said that there has not been an organization willing to step out. Some of our, I think it listed Florida DEP, Tallahassee Museum, and John G. Riley Center and Museum were not willing to take this on when the discussion was had. Am I right, Mr. Administrator?
That's correct.
Okay. Disassembling the building, which I'm sure is a pretty costly thing, and then moving it to another location would thereby then make it ineligible for the same state and federal historic grants that we've talked about today?
In some cases, yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Madam Attorney, Dr. C has been a champion and has gathered a lot of information. I would like to ask her to come up to the podium. Is that proper? Does the chair have that prerogative? I want to ask some questions of Dr. C related to this.
If you as chair wish for her to come up and speak, and that's the will of the board, that's permissible.
Very good. Dr. C, could you give us a little clarification, hearing the angles of which our commission has lifted up various questions?
Absolutely. And again, all of these things that you've talked about are the kinds of things that we've been working on. Friends of the Lake Hall School was the nonprofit that's supporting this. It's a 501c3 now. And so we were looking for ways in which we could access this space without all of these extra complications that everyone's mentioned. And here's the thing. There are approximately 8 vacant lots on Lake Hall Road and Thomasville. And all of those lots are next to or give access to the school. We talked to the state park folks and designed an entryway at Lake Hall Road and Thomasville Road that would provide all of these things that you're talking about: parking, bathrooms, other kinds of things that the code requires. That would occupy that whole corner. I wish I had my maps, Commissioner Welch. And then there are 2 vacant lots next to this entryway. So that when people would come to the school, they would come to this corner at Lake Hall Road and Thomasville Road, and they would park there, and they would get out and walk on 2 lots that are still pristine with trees and all kinds of foresty things, and that would be walking trails. And then they would go through those walking trails to approach the school. So there wouldn't be any need to gain access to the community that you've been talking about where the private road is. Would never go there, because everything you're doing is going to be on Lake Hall Road and Thomasville Road. Now, the gentleman who was here earlier, he's gone, but he is the developer of the housing that's gone on the Lake Hall Road, $500,000 homes. There's no park there. So this would not only give access to the school, these would be bike trails, and walking trails, running trails, that the people who live there can also enjoy. Now, we talked to also the older communities that are back along Lake Hall Road, and they like the idea very much of having a state park on that corner. So in order to move this along and to try to figure out a way to incorporate the school with its surroundings without bothering the neighbors who are living there, this park idea came up. And the people at the state parks were very taken by it. And they offered to help interpret the space, because these are the people who were slaves at McClay Gardens. So they have a natural connection, the descendants do, in that land to McClay Gardens. It's the story of the people and the slaves who worked there. And this is where they lived. And after the Civil War, they would walk from where they are located, down to McClay Gardens to work. Now, all that new development is there now, but heretofore, they'd always walked there. So there are these natural connections. There's a way to make that into a state park. State park people are up for it, got a letter of support from them to have a new park there. And the job is to have access to the school. And we're not asking, again, to buy anybody's property. We're asking for a plot to be drawn around that school and give us access to the school only. We don't need anybody's home. We don't have to come down any private roads. The property, if in fact we can move that forward, the property on Thomasville Road that's for sale now,
Right.
Is willing to give us an easement
Okay.
into the school.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. C. I know Commissioner Dozier's hand is up. Ms. Davis, you jumping out the seat on this. Now, I want to, hopefully we do this in 5 minutes or so, a long time on this one item. But we have more information before us than when we started on number 8. I don't know if the state is going to pay reparations on this property, but do they want to buy, and will they buy this property?
They have millions of dollars to put towards these kind of projects, and we were in that process, but we can't move forward without owning it.
Commissioners, I think that this is new information, that really this item, we ought to table it to integrate a lot more data. Dr. C is highly respected, and I trust that if there are some letters or writings from the state, let's exhaust all of the options, in particular, those which would not strain what we've not budgeted for.
Move to table the item.
All right, we have a motion to table, asking staff to please get with Dr. C, Mrs. Davis, and others, that we might get a more comprehensive view of the state's role and what they want to do here. And also, we got a second from Commissioner Jackson, motion from Commissioner Maddox, and that we also, in terms of exercising the eminent domain, it ought be for an active role for the public. Eminent domain is for a use for the public, but an eminent domain for a passive non-use really for the public, but for a building to sit there in the sun and rot, that to me does not always trigger to me. So I need to hear, and I want to hear what the state of Florida feels about. They were complicit in that thing called slavery. So I want to hear what they want to do. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dozier, you want to weigh in?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. A number of the questions I had have been already asked, and I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the hard work that you all have done, Dr. C, everyone. And quite frankly, this is one of those items where I think it shows the interest, the commitment, financial and otherwise, that many in this community have had, local county, but also Riley House, many volunteers over 2 decades to preserve this property. We've demonstrated that commitment in a lot of ways. So I think that's why it's a struggle for a lot of us, is because we want to be able to do something and we keep looking for more options, but there are limitations on what we as a county can do and how we exercise our authority. One thought I had when Mr. County Administrator was speaking earlier about the stormwater and other factors is I heard just yesterday someone kind of lamenting the rules we have in growth management. Sorry for that, Barry, but they do. We all know that. We have to follow our own rules, right? I mean, we can't make choices in a situation like this to not have public access, to not do some of the environmental or stormwater issues that anyone else would be required to do. So that does complicate this particular situation. I think it tugs at me a little bit more because it was there when all these other homes were built around it. I mean, the access, the point you made, Dr. C, I mean, there was an access issue when the school was built, and then access was denied by selling all the property around it and everything. We didn't preserve it at that time. So it is a good point. It doesn't overcome some of these challenges we have. So I think tabling the issue is fine. We're not giving staff direction necessarily to bring it back. It's just kind of leaving it open in case other options come up. Is that correct? Okay, so one question, Mr. County Administrator. In the item, you mentioned if the owners were willing to sell or donate the property, there may be ways to access state or even federal dollars, perhaps, to purchase that if it was for sale. It wouldn't require eminent domain. Is that correct? If there were a willing seller?
That's correct.
Okay. So because if we exercise eminent domain or some other way to take this property, we own it. That may not be the best position for accessing other funding, and thankfully there is substantial, maybe for really the first time, we are seeing substantial funding at the state and federal level for preserving all of our history, and particularly that history that we haven't focused on, and African American history. So that I'm interested to see, you brought that forward, Dr. C, as an opportunity that may have come back up today. So if that opens more doors for state and federal funding, certainly, I think we can get behind that, we can support it. But I think just the discussion now, I'm not prepared to move forward with eminent domain or anything. And I think we've already covered this, but just one last comment that I had in my notes. Hearing reference to just 10 feet around the building. It's one thing to take possession. I mean, obviously, Mr. Chair, you said this, others have. We need public access. But I would also be concerned even if we were allowed to just take the 10-foot perimeter around the building, but not have access to any funding for it. Well, it's still sitting there without public access, without improvements that could preserve it for the long term, and that's really the goal. I know there are other options for that, but there's a number of different challenges there. So I'm fine with where the motion is right now. I do hope, there are other options move forward. And I can't help but kind of add this on. This is more reflecting back on a couple of agenda items we've had. I really appreciate this board's discussion on the issue we took up late last year about staff for the archaeological and cultural review. That deals with development, but we also discussed hiring a joint position with the city. And like other counties, if we had a position like that, they could help folks who, when we identify a cemetery we didn't know, when we identify a location like this, it wouldn't solve all the problems we talked about today. But I just wanted to bring that in here because I really do hope the city decides to walk with us at some point, to use your phrase, Mr. Chair, because that type of position, that expertise, could help us navigate these issues perhaps better in the future for both city and county. So that's something that I think we should keep nudging our partners at the city to join us with that, and I hope we get some traction this year. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's strange, it's not ironic. It's a good thing that we're having this on the 8th day of Black History Month, a conversation like this. I remember I was probably one of the first people to go out with Dr. C to actually see the property and walk in it and walk through it. Yes, it is a lot of paint and paint thinners and things of that nature in there, but when I walked in the building, what I imagined what it might have looked like when children are running through that building learning. I get that there are a lot of opportunities, or we've taken advantage of a lot of opportunities with properties similar to this one to preserve that history. But any time that you allow for history not to be preserved, especially when it comes to the history of African American history, I think it's a travesty and so I'm glad that we're taking the time, and I appreciate Commissioner Welch pushing this item and being willing to go as far as to look at eminent domain to preserve this gem that we have in our community. There's a lot of challenges to it, but there's a lot of people working hard to preserve it. And as long as we have those people willing to work hard to preserve it, I think we should give them every opportunity to do so. And so, Dr. C, I think this board is showing its commitment as we have for years, because it's been years ago since I walked through that building. But we're showing our commitment to give the opportunity to see this thing through. There's a lot of information that you gave us today. There's a lot of people that have to be involved in order for us to make this happen. But that's with all issues. If you even look at what we're going to look at later with the status on council on the status of men and boys, it's going to take 5 different entities to conquer that animal, and this is no different. And so I'm glad we're willing to have the conversation. I ask staff to work with our Dr. C and the state as much as they can to see how we can move this ball forward. But the last thing I'll say is I don't want to keep kicking the can forward. When it comes back, I want it to come back with something that we can look at as solutions or definite, this is something that we can't do. So we can either move forward with it or close the door on it. And my hopes is that we'll take the time to be able to come up with creative ideas, innovative ideas is what we do here in Leon County to move the ball forward. Because again, once upon a time, there were children who ran through that building. Once upon a time, there were teachers who taught in that building. And those teachers and children look just like me. And even some of the history Dr. C talked about of, people walking from Lake Hall down to McClay Gardens to work. It's just so much history tied up in that you just, I don't think we as Americans can afford to lose, not just in Black History Month, but in any month. And so I'm proud to support the motion on the floor and look forward to seeing what we can come up with to save this gym in our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, we have labored on this matter. I'm sorry, Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I think, as everyone has said, I think everyone here has an interest in preserving the Lake Hall Schoolhouse. I think that's been pretty clear. I also want to thank Dr. C and everyone that has been working so hard for 3 years or more on this building. You know, we spent a lot of time, justifiably so, on talking about restoring the schoolhouse in place. Based on the agenda item materials, that cost would be about $500,000. That does not include the cost of constructing an access road if we decided to go that route. It probably doesn't also include the cost of eminent domain legal fees. So that's $500K plus for restoring the building in its place and then making it accessible to the public. The other option, which is in the agenda packet, is relocating it. And we talked about, how fragile it is, it could not be moved, but the cost there is roughly about $1 million. We would have to find the money, purchase the property, move it, and then identify and secure a location that would be accessible to the public and encourage the public to go. My point, the main point I want to make is I'm going to support the motion to table. I also want to keep that relocating idea alive. And Dr. C, I'd like to meet with you if you've got time and are able. I'd like to sit down with you and talk about this. That may not be a good option, but I want to keep that alive because that may end up being a really helpful option for us to consider. Because we have to restore the building, but then also I think to gain the most educational value out of it, it's helpful to put it in a place where people are going to be. The Tallahassee Museum is a great example. My family was at the Concord Schoolhouse, which has been really well preserved. That's at the Tallahassee Museum. It's really a great exhibit. A place like that would be very accessible. Lots of people would see it. I don't know if that's the option we would go through, but I want us to keep that alive as something that we consider when this agenda item comes back. And I'm going to support the motion to table. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Reverend William Fouts, our president of Southern Christian Leadership Council, is in the building. And I know he may have some remembrance. I'm not asking a question, Reverend Fouts, but I want to recognize you. And I want to recognize you that I also tone my comments to what I'm about to say. And that is that this house offers a tangible example of wokeness, of staying woke, without instructional markers or a state marker, something that talks to a public. That old wooden building don't say a thing to nobody, other than everyone wonders, why is it in the midst of $500,000 homes? I believe that moving the building, if it's the building that's so sacred, it can be lifted and moved, but to build a holding pond, stormwater, possibly, have to build a road, possibly, to exercise eminent domain. To me, the issue is not just about public access, but what is the public purpose? And if we are clear that we are simply having a building there as a symbol for wokeness, the discrepancy of schools and what black people learned in as buildings, we have some examples of those discrepancies today. The difference between Roberts Elementary and some of the other schools, like Riley Elementary, still point out discrepancies. So, with great sensitivity, Reverend Fouts, if it was my money, an option on me, I'd put a historic marker there, and I would not put this little $1 million that the administrator is talking about. It's going to be a few more $1 million on that wooden building. That building has served its purpose. God knows it has. And at some point in our lives, I think a marker says a lot about who was there. Hearing no other discussion, all in favor of the motion offered by the Vice Chairman, seconded by Commissioner Jackson, please say aye. Any opposers? It passes unanimously. Dr. C, Ms. Davis, we thank you all for your role, your work. There's more work to do. We're looking forward that our staff is going to help exhaust the role for the state of Florida as we hope to capture the importance of this property and what it means. Thank you. Are there any speakers to be heard, Ms. Administrator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 speaker cards in under citizens to be heard under non-agenda items.
Very good.
The first one up is a Zoom caller, Cindy Team.
Okay. Mr. T.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, would you state your name and address, please?
Cindy Team, and I live at 1515 Oldfield Drive. I was invited to attend this meeting through Dr. C, and I really didn't have anything to contribute other than that the owner of the property up for sale, 4664 Thomasville Road, was aware of this project even before he had decided to sell his home, and is in favor of, in any way he can, to preserve the schoolhouse, be it an easement or, other things that Dr. C had seek to propose. So I was really here just to attend and to learn more about the project, but to also to let you know that the owner of the home currently up for sale is in support of easement, access, or anything to help preserve it while you continue to figure out how to own it and totally preserve it, because it had been let go apparently over the summer months.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Teen. We're going to ask if our staff will factor your comments that the owner is willing to do the part which you have shared with us. We thank you for your call. Our next speaker.
Next speaker, Donna Cotterill.
Ms. Cotterill.
We're moving on. I understand we lost Ms. Cotterill. Barbara Goldstein.
Ms. Goldstein, if you would give us your name and your address, please.
Sure. I'm Barbara Goldstein. My address is 2217 Delta Lane. I'm the Executive Director of the Holocaust Education Resource Council. And I'm here today just for awareness that there's been a number of anti-Semitic incidents statewide and locally. And just wanted to, hopefully in the next meeting or in the future, we could come together to address it and hopefully be proactive and not reactive. And as much as we hopefully don't want to say it's not happening here, but it is happening here. And I'm trying to come to some understanding of how we can work together as a community and a county together on this.
Ms. Osteen, I want to thank you for what you've said. I want to ask Rachel, if you wave your hands. I want to meet with you about what you're talking about, and that's my aide right there holding her hands in the air. Y'all get together and we'll talk a little further about what you're doing.
Sure. So we'll talk another day.
Me and you going to talk, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing what you're saying.
I'll follow up with your aid.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Rachel, get her information so I can talk to her.
Thank you.
All right. Our next speaker.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Greg Patterson.
Hey, Mr. Patterson, welcome.
Good afternoon, commissioners, administrative staff, and my fellow members of Leadership Tallahassee Class 39. As one of my roles in Tallahassee is the executive director of Choose Tallahassee, we're a 501c3 economic development organization, and I just want to share a couple things about our organization. As you probably know, our mission is to spread the good word about our home, Tallahassee and Leon County. We originally started out targeting retirees, and with that success, we've expanded that to include entrepreneurs, young professionals, and students. If you look on our website, we have relocation guides for all those different categories, and just want to tell you, we've laid the foundation, and it's working. We are now getting 100 leads a month of people wanting to know more about our community, and they're from all walks of life. We also serve in a supporting role when OEV or TMH or our schools are trying to recruit people to move here, whether they be professors or medical personnel. When you're being recruited, the question always comes down to, what's it like to live in Tallahassee? And we're the good news. When you go to our website, it talks about live here, work here, play here, learn here. We have blogs. We've had a couple commissioners that have blogged on it. We've had some commissioners that support us. And by golly, it's working. Our budget is under $150,000 a year. We're grassroots. We do have some support from the county and Visit Tallahassee, but most of it is grassroots, and we're pleased that it is working. We are diverse. We have a diversity committee because we want to be here to represent all of Tallahassee. So with that, just wanted to give you an update. I'm going to probably set a meeting to meet with each one of you individually to thank you and share the news. But I wanted to come here and just share a little bit of good news and thank you for your support.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
would you give us your address for the record, please, sir?
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
It is 2147 Pink Flamingo Lane.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Our next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, our final speaker, Reverend William Faust.
Excuse my mess, but Reverend William Faust, 6504 North Meridian Road. Man, I didn't notify my commissioner to tell him I was going to surprise him to come here tonight. But you see, this is history. Now is the time to all of us as Tallahasseans. You're doing the right thing. This is nothing but history. And what I'm here tonight, I have a problem. I'm dealing with history. Alger Rollins, Walker Rollins. After slavery, going on 150 years, on North Meridian Road, across the street from Hawk Rise School, from Gardner Road to the Rollins there. It was through slavery, after slavery. You have heard of the 40 acres and a mule. This is a part of it, my family. And with those 40 acres, 10 acres was saved by my family because of the Phipps. You know, people's coming in, buying land. But I want to thank God for my commissioner there. Commissioner, we love you, man. You fought hard. But I have a neighbor, moved in, nothing wrong. But after moving in last year, now he is suing me for a little lot next to mine to get city water, in which I don't have city water. I don't have city utility. But suing me right now, and to the attorney of Leon County, I need help. I shouldn't have to spend my own money to defend. I pay out close to $27,000 for taxes to Leon County. That's a salary. Am I right? That's a salary. I didn't want to come up here tonight, but I'm just up to my neck. I done retired, and I shouldn't have to come. I was talking with some of the young ladies there, letting them know, when I come, I don't come to beg for anything. I come to make things happen. I'm not here just to be here, because I got a man on my side, God, and I need help for you all, the county commission. I love all of you. You're doing a super job. Super job. But it's not for me to come and tell you a story which is dealing with two governments. The city of Tallahassee. They the only one have utilities. Am I right?
You're right, Reverend Phelps. And
Yes,
I
I'm
think
going to leave
that,
this in you all hands.
Commissioner Minor is aware, I believe, of some of the dynamics and issues that you're speaking to. Certainly what Reverend Phelps, Commissioners, has been coming before us for a number of years. That Mason-Dixie line called Meridian Road, which distinguishes services provided to Ox Bottom and Summerbrook neighborhoods, which the historic black communities, Paramore Estates and everything aligned on that side of the street. People who don't have the gas, don't have the water, they don't have the sewer. And unfortunately, on the, is that the east?
Yes, on the east side is the city.
I got you. And the high pressured gas runs through the black people's property.
In my front yard.
But they cannot receive it. But
That's right.
other white neighborhoods can get it.
Commissioner, can I say something here?
Reverend Phelps, I got you.
Yeah, okay.
You're good. And that new neighborhood off of Gardner Road.
Yes.
Mostly white, upper.
They have natural gas.
They have all of the things that the black people still are denied. That's what he's talking about. And these things hurt from the perspective of a nearly 80-year-old man who grew up out there in the area of the Lake Hall School and knows all of those historical denials. Reverend Phelps, what we want to do is I'm going to ask if the county attorney would be kind and would allow Commissioner Minor and y'all team to get together. It's really bad out there, and it's worth cussing over, but Reverend Phelps is a preacher. And that's why we don't hear anything stronger from him. We thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Commissioner.
Real quick, sir. Reverend Phelps, thank you very much for coming. Yes, Reverend Phelps and I have been talking for quite a while about this, and we had reached out to the city of Tallahassee to try to get that meeting to talk about utilities, as well as some other things regarding that, right? I'd like to work with the county administrator and make that meeting happen. We've reached out before, but has not had any results. So I want to make that happen. So Reverend Phelps, let's get together real soon, and we will make sure we get that meeting with the city of Tallahassee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Minor, what Reverend Phelps is talking about is that we're talking about eminent domain, ingress, egress, easement. He's being sued by someone to have access through his land to put water, but he can't get it.
He doesn't have utilities. He didn't have it.
Right, he doesn't.
So
this is amazing thingy. No. All right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Moving right along. All right, commissioners, we have completed our citizens to be heard for the day, and we've heard a lot, frankly, and we've gotten an earful, and we're moving now to our general business. Ms. County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this item seeks board consideration to establish a commission on the status of men and boys. As you may recall, commissioners, during your December 14th meeting, Sheriff McNeil and his staff presented findings of the anatomy of a homicide.
I'm so sorry. Ms. Davis submitted a card under Citizens Be Heard. Did we hear her? Nita Davis.
It's true. I had it in the stack for citizens to be heard at the end of the meeting, but we do have it here. Nita Davis.
Ms. Davis, we're going to make this adjustment. You checked the block for the end of the meeting. I think you meant right now. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me, commissioners. Go ahead, please. 3 minutes.
Mr. Proctor.
State your name
You
and
remember
address.
me? I don't know if you remember me from
Yes,
a long
ma'am.
time ago, but
I'm
you were
familiar
the
with
one
that name.
that stepped
Nita
up
Davis.
and got behind Litchgate on High Road. When when it was going to fall down and disappear and blow away and become apartment buildings, and you were the one that said, and you raised your hand and you helped, and no one believed in it. And it reminds me, but this school can't even compare. I got up here with Litchgate and literally started crying, and I feel like crying now because I started looking for Lake Hall School only to find out it had been found and lost. And I was knocking on doors for years trying to find that school, but it had been found and then lost, okay? And when I walked through those woods and I dropped to my knees. You could hear those children, and you cannot move that school. That school is tied into that land. This is the oldest one-room African-American schoolhouse I know in the state of Florida. Just think about that a minute. The oldest one-room African-American schoolhouse in the state of Florida and possibly in the United States. That's the last, I just can't quite nail it. I haven't found one older, but I can't, until I have the paper, I can't say it. But I know it is in Florida. And it's sitting right here in Leon County. And to say, and we can come up with a lot of things why it can't work, or this or that, or roads and money and money and money. But you know something? You're talking about, this is one thing. You have a jewel. You have something so precious. So precious. Any of you walk out there, you can hear those children. They've been waiting a long time to be heard. Don't do this. Don't come up with some, we have a box and we've got to fall in this box. My family's been here since 1826. I know how that box can move. You can't do this. You can hear that school has been waiting a long time. And like I said, remember this. If you don't do this, this is the oldest in the state of Florida, the whole state. What does that say? There's not even anything that comes close to it. And it's on the original site. You can walk so many feet up and you can see the old Thomasville Road, where those kids came walk down that old Thomasville Road. You can see where it's dug in. So I just want to say, please, reach down deep. And you can find it in that box. And if you can't find it in that box, that box can move. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. We're grateful for your comments. Ms. Administrator, as we move to general business, bring us into item 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this item seeks board's consideration to establish a commission on the status of men and boys. Again, as you'll recall, during your December 14th meeting, Sheriff McNeil and his staff presented findings of the Anatomy of the Homicide report, which analyzed violent crimes in the community in recent years. The report presented several findings and recommendations, including the establishment of a task force to develop a plan with specific goals and strategies to reduce violent crime. Based upon the direction provided by the board at that time, Commissioners, the item before you presents two options for the establishment of a commission on the status of men and boys, should you wish to do so. The item recommends the establishing this commission with a similar structure to the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm talking a general structure that utilizes an existing administrative structure. And I could talk more about that. But based on that model, each participating organization would make a number of appointments to the commission. You might also have appointments that are named by position, should you choose to, and that sort of thing. All that, of course, would come back to the board, and you can make those determinations, again, if that's the model that you choose to pursue. And, of course, it would be staffed under this model by an existing community-based human services organization. The cost to establish and to staff the commission would be determined based on responses to an RFP that we'd put out to the community, and we expect that cost to be similar to the current contract with the Oasis Center for the staffing on the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. As you'll note in the item, the contract with the Oasis Center is for $40,000 annually. That cost is shared with the city, and that includes research and development support for the commission. The item also presents a separate option proposed by the sheriff for the structuring on the Commission of the Status of Men and Boys. The sheriff's proposal includes the hiring of an executive director, as well as additional staffing for case management, data analysis, as well as administrative support. The sheriff's model proposes a leadership council, as well as an executive steering committee and several other subcommittees to address specific areas of focus. As reflected in the sheriff's proposal, which is attached to the item, the personnel and operating costs are estimated to be $350,000 annually. The city and the schools, Leon County Schools, have indicated preliminary interest in participating, but no financial commitments have been made at this time. In conclusion, Commissioners, the item recommends establishing this group based on the Commission on the Status of Men and Girls model and in developing research and policy recommendations regarding the issues that it's anticipated to focus on. Based upon the direction the board provides today, we'll bring back an item for your March 8th meeting for the board's consideration to formally establish a commission. And again, I should say, even though we have competing options here, if you will, Commissioners, as I've told you all, we've worked very closely with the Sheriff's Office, as we will continue to do. The difference here is, I think you know this, Commissioners, we do this a lot in terms of programs and initiatives where we leverage our partnerships in the community with existing structures and that sort of thing, so that we can both leverage their expertise in the community, as well as save the taxpayers very considerable dollars in utilizing their administrative structures. So again, we have a different approach, but we're all on the same page as far as the goal is concerned. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll just let you know that we've got a handful of speakers to be heard on this item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Administrator. Commissioners, our administrator is poetically eloquent and politically correctness. And the issue here in item number 1 and 2 is whether or not item 1, if the county commission is going to support and name a board fashion after the women and girls, and that's about $40,000, which we split with the city. Item number 2 essentially gives the control of the board to the sheriff. It costs $350,000. The question is, what are the advantages or disadvantages in terms of meeting the idea of sheriff's proposal? Item number one, option number 1 rather, is the county commission and there being public control over the structure. And option number 2 largely is the sheriff's control and hiring of people at $350,000. And I think that we have kicked this can down the road. Tonight, I don't think that there is a question that either of us have. We talked about this in the retreat. We've talked about this before. The sheriff has presented the report, which is in our minutes. And I'm glad to say that our news reporter, Jada Williams, is here tonight. And on her lead story yesterday, Commissioner, the Mayor Pro Tem of the city, told her that the city will be supportive and will be a partner. So, Jada, I'm glad that you're here to bear witness to what Commissioner Richardson told you yesterday that the city would be. Now, there was no definitive mark, and Jada, you should have asked him and said what amount you're talking about, but you didn't follow up. But he did make that commitment. So, Commissioners, I want to talk about the money. Once we hear from the public, I think the issue then, we go straight to what we got to go to, and that's the hardcore issues of money and control. Mr. Administrator.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Well, first up, we'd like to invite our Sheriff, Walt McNeil, as our first speaker. Sheriff?
Sheriff, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners and Mr. Administrator. Let me begin by trying to get some clarification. As I understood and listened to the Administrator's description of what we're asking, it did not ring as intended. It was never my intent, nor that of my staff, that we would go this alone. The $300,000 that has been mentioned was never a $300,000 amount that we anticipated the Sheriff's Office having, nor did we suggest in the document that I sent over that the county would bear the cost of $300,000. Unless I'm mistaken, the document that I sent said that the Council on the Status of Men and Boys would be shared by 5 entities. And I heard earlier tonight that Commissioner Maddox mentioned that, so I assumed that he read the document. The document basically takes a position that $70,000 from those 5 entities would result in a $350,000 investment in trying to reduce the number of murders that we have in our community. We go on to try to highlight and distinguish the fact that the Anatomy of a Homicide document tells us that there are some 140 persons killed in the last 5 years, and 83% of those persons killed had something in common. And that something in common was that they were either expelled from school or they were put in alternative schools. And what we seek to do with the effort we put in place, the Council on the Status of Men and Boys, what we seek to do is to stop that carnage that's occurring in our streets. If you saw the Tallahassee Democrat's news article on yesterday, I believe they indicated that there are some 1,800 persons who meet that criteria of being on the way to drop out, being expelled, or going to alternative schools. They listed the number of schools in our community being impacted in that way. We don't, and I say we, the members of the Leon County Sheriff's Office, have no desire to put $300,000 on one entity in our community. In fact, our whole mantra has been, for the last 6 years, that everything we do is in a partnership. We call that all in. And what we seek to do with this initiative is to engage all of us in this community in a partnership to share the cost of dealing with these problems that are pervasive in our community for the last 8 years. So I just want to make sure that I'm not sure how as I heard this being described, I was a little bit concerned, because never was it ever our intention that the Leon County Sheriff's Office would be at the front and center of this. In fact, I've said this to you before. The question was asked to me early on, why didn't the Sheriff's Office do this alone? And I had 2 responses to that. One is that law enforcement doesn't necessarily have the legitimacy and the trust that many of our community expect, and certainly we expect, but that's a reality. And the second is that the likelihood is that it wouldn't be as effective with all of us engaged in trying to deal with these issues. So, Commissioners.
Sheriff, if you would come up for air for just a second, and I want to make sure that the premise that you are speaking to tonight is that, and the county administrator and I have been talking, and I'm not sure that the premise you presented is your understanding, is actually the understanding that the board has been presented or is. So I want to ask if you would please accept just for a second a clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just before we get too far down the road, Sheriff, I'm not sure what you heard in my description, but your proposal is included verbatim in this item, exactly what your proposal is. And that's, and the spirit and letter of it is reflected in this item, as well as in my speaking points, which does contemplate the sharing of that burden. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. We've just noted that there has not been any funding commitments to this point. However, that's not to be, that is to be, I think, expected at this point in the process. But we're on the same page. Just wanted to make sure you knew that. Again, your proposal is here reflected verbatim as received from your office.
Sheriff, I'm sorry, no one is trying to pull the rug from under your initial understanding. So if in the translation of that which is verbal, please note that which is written is precisely to the tune of what you have, I apologize, sir. So if you want to start over from the top, let's not put the sheriff on a timer and start from that positive statement that you wanted, and we're there. I think what we're talking about tonight is if you could tell us how this structure under option 2, which would be the appointment and control under your office, how does that approach advantage meeting your goals versus this being more similar to the women and girls setup wherein commissioners appoint members, and as administrators pointed out, there's more of a public ownership than it being under your office. That's really some part of where the rubber meets the road for our commission.
Again, I'm confused because that is not what the item before you contemplates.
I'm just reading what
contemplates that the commission would, in fact, have the ability to appoint persons to the council. It is never contemplated that those actions be solely that of the sheriff.
Well, the staffing, let's go to that point. The person who would hire and all of those things and who they would report to, how would you envision that role being executed?
The document contemplates that we, the 5 entities, working together, would hire a person who would be the executive director.
Blueprint is sort of like that, commissioners. The city manager, the county administrator, we have 2 people hired. 5 people hiring somebody is definitely a new model. And I have to apologize again, Sheriff, because it was my thoughts that under 2, that you or your office would possibly be hiring a person, and it would be a sheriff's executive director over the council.
No,
that's not.
It is not. The document is fluid in that we'd work through those dynamics as we work together as a team. We would figure those dynamics out in terms of who makes those decisions. And I say that it was never our intent that the sheriff's office owns this council in the status of men and boys.
While the sheriff is here, are there commissioners who want to ask or have specific questions of Sheriff McNeil about the proposal? It's an excellent one. We're in a very rare moment that we have a sheriff who has researched with hardcore data, has saw a problem, has proposed a public policy solution to address that problem. This is a rare moment because I've never in real time seen the effort of a law enforcement person do what he has done as a process.
Mr. Chair?
It's a spectacular moment, and Commissioner Dozier.
Just a quick question here. You all jumped right into some questions about this item. It was my impression that, and forgive me, Sheriff McNeil, you came to the podium asking for a clarification question. I appreciate you doing that. I had some of the same questions. But it was my impression we had other speakers, and perhaps Sheriff McNeil wanted to provide other comments now that we've kind of worked through some of those initial issues. So it would be my preference, I mean, it's your discretion, Mr. Chair, but to get through the speakers or any other general comments and presentation before we get into discussion as usual.
Okay. Are there commissioners who wanted to weigh in before the other speakers? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in the speaker's queue, but I think I'd like to hear from the other speakers after the sheriff is done, and then have discussion, and then I do have a question for him after that.
Okay. Commissioner Welch?
I'm confused. And I can ask those questions now or later, Mr. Chairman.
Let's go with later. Okay. All right. Commissioner Cummings, you good until later? Okay. All right. Our speakers.
First speaker is Dr. Willie Williams.
Dr. Williams, welcome. Please state your name and your address.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Willie Williams, 4525 Westover Drive. Good evening. Once again, I'm Willie Williams. Last Tuesday, I sent an email both to city and county commissioners requesting detailed data metrics be provided in reference to youth programs ages 15 to 25 from both the county, the city, Leon County Sheriff Department, and TPD as well. That information should be easily accessible because measuring and assessing programs should be something that is ongoing on a monthly basis in order to know if they're working. It's not necessarily an end of the year thing, it's a month-to-month thing that should be taking place. So I would expect that that information is easily accessible. But I did that for two reasons in light of Leon County Sheriff report, from an academic standpoint, a very thorough report, Sheriff. But I did that for first reason, because we need a different approach. The time for town hall meetings and doing community needs assessments is over. We've done that. We know for the most part what's there. We now know the root of a lot of the issues. And truth be told, a lot of this we already knew before. We must begin evaluating programs that we say are for this age group and seeing if they're working or if they're not working. Are there any gaps? Are they overlapping? And do we need to shift resources to continue community building or capacity building? So that was one of the reasons I sent that report and requested that information, because we need to start looking into our programs that we say are serving our youth. The second point that I sent that report is because I've been in Tallahassee 25 years, came in to get my bachelor's degree, ended up with a master's and a PhD as well. I've been in Tallahassee half my life. I've had a wife and kids, been able to be part of many of the youth programs that were started here in Tallahassee. Matter of fact, was with the delegation that went to Colorado, obtained the All-American Award and brought it back to Tallahassee. I was on that bus that took 25 black males to Colorado to get that award and bring it back. And so one of the things that kept me from returning to Jacksonville is because I wanted to protect my son, who is now 17, from being exposed and experiencing losing a friend at a young age. And I hate to say that I failed on that. I failed. As many programs as I've put together here in Tallahassee, I've failed on that. And we have failed on that because last year he lost a friend at 16 to gun violence. And I should have known I couldn't keep that promise, because as someone who's been involved with youth programs, I've lost teenagers as well here in Tallahassee to gun violence. And so what I'm asking you to do is to continue putting priority. Thank you for pushing the Commission on the Status of Men and Boys forward, but continue pushing it as a priority, because kids now we have relabeled from at risk to at promise, but the promise is on us. And in the words of Martin Luther King, I ask that you don't issue a default promissory note by taking money away from these programs, but put money to this program, because if you check the statistics, we're already playing from behind. Thank you for pushing it forward, but when it comes to black males, we're already behind. And so at least that we can do is put the money to try to catch up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
The next speaker, Tom Blomberg, sorry about that. Next speaker, Tom Blomberg.
Tom Blomberg, 6334 Thomasville Road. I'm Dean of the College of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Florida State University, and I'm here to speak in support of the proposed council on the status of men and boys. What we've been engaged in the College of Criminology is we've been working with the Sheriff's Department in a research capacity. And what we've been doing is we've been looking at various violence reduction programs across the United States. All of you know, homicide is growing in many, many cities. So we were looking at what are the best practices? What can be done to stem this horrible problem here in Tallahassee? And then when we gathered all that information on various programs around the country, we then met with the Sheriff's Department and again discussed how his effort to literally combine and coordinate what's going on in Tallahassee now, though it's being independently administered. And the promising practice that is implicit in what the sheriff is talking about is the whole idea that there will be law enforcement, there will be education, there will be community, and various other types of efforts. The best practice is not a singular focus, it's a multi-focus practice. What the College of Criminology and Criminal Justice will do is we will evaluate what goes on in Leon County and Tallahassee. We will evaluate this council. We will look at it in terms of the services that are being provided, the inputs and services, the immediate results, and when we see that the results are not where they should be, we will diagnostically provide that information because Tallahassee, as we all know, is unique. Leon County is unique. Yes, we're similar to other counties, but we've got some distinctions too. So any program that's developed has to evolve over time, and it must be data driven. And that's what we will do in the College of Criminology and Criminal Justice. We are known, our tagline in the college is research brought to life. And we take that very seriously. We're not just about publishing and ivory towered research. We're about really informing, translating our research into policies and practices that reduce the pain and suffering of crime. And that's what we're here to do and what we plan to do with the Sheriff's Initiative on this council. We also, you might ask yourself, I've heard a lot of discussion about dollars, where we plan to get our money to do all this is through collaborative grants that we will submit. We've been doing that. We're doing it with the Real-Time Crime Center. We're the evaluation component for the Capital Real-Time Crime Center. I'm sure you've heard about that. It's going to be kicking off very soon. We're doing that with Walton County. We've got partnerships. We're doing it with Palm Beach County. We do these partnerships and we gain the necessary funding to, again, inform these policies and practices. Thank you.
Dean Bloomberg, we never stop speakers who say that they got some money to bring to the table.
Well, and
that's partners. We like to hear stuff.
Well, we just got a $500,000 BJA, Bureau of Justice Statistics grant to help support the Real-Time Crime Center. And one of the important features there is we're going to be conducting community surveys. We're not just going to bring this technology into these communities. We want the community to get buy-in and to know what's going on. So we'll be doing a survey. But that is what we do. We are known for our research, but we have a very large center, and our center, it brings in all external funding, and it's much, much bigger than the college itself.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
Dr. Williams, where'd Dr. Williams go? Okay, very good.
The next speaker, Whitfield Leland.
Mr. Leland, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Whitfield Leland, 754 West 7th Avenue. I sit in here and I listen to everybody with this situation. I mean, I read the report the sheriff put out. I'm also looking at what's happening on the streets. We ain't but 38 days, 26 shootings. How many? And I can't even count on two hands how many of them have been killed. And we sit in here and argue about who's gonna have control and where the money coming from. Are we serious? At the end of the day, that report states everything that we've been saying as advocates, community leaders, and politicians for the last 10 years. And we can sit in here and argue about who's going to have oversight. At the end of the day, everybody need to be on board. I don't see us doing the same thing as we're doing with the women and girls, what we're going to do with the men and the boys. We have to take a different approach. And at the end of the day, Sheriff, to be totally honest, being in the streets and working with these people every day, the money you ask for ain't enough. Because at the end of the day, for me, because I've been there, if you're in the streets, you got to give me a damn good opportunity for me to get out. And at the end of the day, as politicians, leaders, and advocates, we got to start giving our boys, black boys, a great opportunity to get out. Because guess what? Everybody else get one. Everybody else get one. So at the end of the day, I ask y'all to not sit here and argue about where the money gonna come from and who's in control. Let's put a plan. Let's get behind the sheriff. And I read the proposal. I went inside and read every piece of it. He lists a whole, like almost 2 pages of community leaders and how it's gonna be set up. Get everybody at the table because that's who you're gonna need. What you got going on right now, that ain't doing no good. We got to do something else. So I urge y'all to take up option 2. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Leland. Is there another speaker?
The next speaker is Stanley Sims.
Mr. Sims, did you say boom shakalaka?
You know I did.
I thought so.
My name's Stanley Sims. My wife, after 20-some years, still let me come home at 1320 Avondale Way. Mr. Welch, Commissioner Welch, you never cease to amaze me, young man, with that Project Lake Hall. Sheriff Walt McNeil, who's had the double pleasure of not only being my sheriff, but also while he was Secretary of the Department of Correction, he was my secretary. And I want to really highlight something that I think skipped over this room. The sheriff said, as much as I love to have the credibility of this community, I know I don't. See, you don't make statements like that if you're in it just for politics, because that's risky. But we're in a time, Commissioner Cummings, where every time my 2 black boys walk out that door, it's risky. And it's not risky for them because they're selling drugs or they toting a gun. It's risky because they may get a stray bullet. This past weekend, I had the bittersweet pleasure to stand with Trayvon Martin's mother. And Vince Long, Jamie Foxx told me to tell you, you're doing a good job up here. I don't know how you got that connection, but I support the sheriff. I support the sheriff initiative because he don't claim it, but it's very detailed. And I'm not trying to knock women and girls initiative, but that's good. But I think this approach, according to his anatomy, we need that same, maybe Main Street, but we might put different flowers and bumper speeds on the road. It do. I'm very deliciously pleased to see FSU, who has worked with me, Commissioner, I know about 5 years, in understanding this data. And don't y'all shoot me because I ain't got but 10 seconds. But I agree with former Governor Jeb Bush. If we don't measure, we cannot hold ourselves accountable. The sheriff proposals calls for accountability. Thank you for my time. I'm doing a little better. I'm going to the doctor. Y'all watch this.
All right, boom shakalaka boom. All right,
Final,
thank you.
Final speaker, Mr. Chairman, Rudolph Ferguson Sr.
Reverend Ferguson, we thank you for being here.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rudolph Ferguson, 1209 Clay Street, Tallahassee, Florida, Griffin Heights neighborhood. This is my first time coming to speak to you all, but I have watched you all on the screen. And I'm standing today as a resident and a childhood kid of Griffin Heights. Thank God that I made it, because a lot of my young friends are gone. Their children are gone. As a pastor of New Birth in the Griffin Heights neighborhood, it's a sad commentary when you have to put 7 kids in the ground because of gun violence. I don't care what people say with the scriptures. I know the scriptures know them very well, but a mother does not want to hear that God doesn't understand. A mother can't comprehend that God knows best when a child has been laid to rest for unnecessary reasons. So tonight I've come to support the sheriff, whom I've known since I was 17. I've known him a very long time when he was captain at the police department. I have the distinct pleasure of serving on his advisory council. I also have the distinct pleasure of serving as the chairman of the Citizens Advisory Council for the Tallahassee Police Department. Why do I do these things? I do them because it is necessary, it is vital. These children who don't understand politics, they don't understand the workings and the process up here. This is why the last time we were here, when the sheriff came to make a presentation and it was passed to staff to do this and to do that, we've had a lot of gun violence, we've had murder. We're back now, and I'm listening, and I'm trying to understand the process of that, the money, how much money. We spend more money on everything else, but the process of spending money for the sheriff's concept to save our little boys and girls, we shouldn't be haggling about $350,000, because I do know that a lot of people in this building make close to that. And the reality of it all is very simple. When a community with limited resources start running out, they start looking for those resources in other places. Poverty is the mother of crime. And this is where we are now. And this is why our young people have chosen the way of the gun. Now, some may say, well, that's on the other side of the track. And I would hope that everybody in this room would understand that our children are our children in light of what color they are. It is very important for us to understand that. What affects one child directly affects all of them indirectly. So I stand today to support the sheriff's anatomy, homicide report. It is true. It is real. I'm 50 years old, and I grew up in this community, and I've seen it with my own eyes. So again, commissioners, you are empowered, you have the authority, and you are authorized to do whatever's necessary to save the children of Leon County in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Commissioners, I want to go around the dais, starting with Commissioner Minor coming around, getting your input, on this bone. And we don't have to be here very long, but we've dealt with this. We've received the sheriff's report. We have endorsed it. So we're on board. That's not even a question here today. But the question today is your preferences for how we stack and create the model, I think is a key thing, the model, and then the sharing among other entities, and where are we? And I'm sure we're there as well. Commissioner Minor, Dozier, Welch, Cummings, Jackson, and Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank the sheriff and his team for the Anatomy of a Homicide project. If you haven't seen it yet, look at it online. It's really terrific, and terrific in its analysis, disturbing in its findings. But the findings give us a targeted approach on what lies next. And I want to thank the sheriff for proposing the Council on Men and Boys. I think we all we're definitely all looking for the council to start. It's really a question of what that structure is going to be. And when the sheriff and I talked earlier today, it was the $350,000 split among the 5 different entities. But then and Sheriff, I don't want to put words in your mouth, sir, but my understanding was that was initial seed money for year one. And then once year two were to start, I think the sheriff and his office believe that funding could be obtained, at least that's the plan, largely through grants and other types of funding. Dr. Sheriff, is that correct? All right. Listen, the money's not the only important issue. It's not even number 2 or 3, but it is a good factor in helping us understand within the context of what we're looking at. I think the sheriff has proposed a good structure here. I think the funding, we've been dealing with gun violence in this community for a very long time, and every single time someone is killed, I know it hurts all of us deeply, and I'm as tired of it as anybody else here, and I want action, and we are a component of taking that action, and I want to see that through. So I will support the sheriff's recommendation on the structure that he's proposed, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Indeed, in augmenting the point that you made, I'm heartened today because Dean Bloomberg is here to state their partnership from Florida State, as well as the plethora of grant sources that means. So, Dean, kudos to you. We're excited. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echoing my colleagues' comments and just reflecting a bit on our speakers. Thank you all. You hit on a lot of good points for exactly why we need to move forward. Dean Bloomberg, I may have missed the beginning, but if you didn't note that your department is #1 in the world, we should note that. We are extremely lucky to have such a renowned criminology department right here at Tallahassee and in FSU. And a little personal note, I was able to do some interdisciplinary classes with your department a couple of decades ago. It's been a while, but in grad school. And it has really just stayed with me ever since then and really informed me. So thank you for what you do and what your team does. Appreciate that. I think this is one of several examples in recent years where we are engaging with our partners at FSU and FAMU more directly than ever, and that's really exciting. If we look at the CHSP process in the ASCII school, we have incredible resources right here, and we need to work with them as much as we can. And I think what I hear from you and others is it benefits your work and your research and your students as much as it may benefit our local communities. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Sheriff McNeil, you and your team, I don't know if the chair said this earlier, but this is a robust plan that has come back to us. Obviously, a lot of work went into it. And like the anatomy of the homicide report, like a lot of other things, it's very thoughtful, it's very proactive. If we just look at the list of community partners, it's extensive. I mean, we know that kind of gut feeling, but it was good to see it in print. And I brought up a little bit of this. We started on the conversation a couple months ago, but I have had concerns about the structure of the Commission on Status of Women and Girls, not because they don't do good work. We very much appreciate those volunteers, but this is a different effort. So I am very glad to have a different proposal than that one structure. Mr. County Administrator, I hear you when you say that we take steps to be as efficient and cost effective as possible at all times. But I respectfully disagree. In this case, we've had numbers quoted to us about the cost of people staying at detention center. The cost to individual lives when we have issues, when gun violence takes place or any type of issues into the community. We are all in with Neighborhood First, with 32304, with CHSP, with our homeless. I mean, we've stepped up in a lot of different ways. So if this initiative could get us some policy recommendations, some really good ideas going forward. When we have opportunities like Children's Service Council, CHSP, others that we've never had before, I think this may save lives, but also save us money if we're going to think about that in the future. So I understand, Ms. County Administrator, why that would be the natural fit. I mean, that's where we go to, and we do a lot of good work through those models. Just for me, I think this is, and I think for a lot of us, this is a different task. It is time to do something collaborative with our partners. And based on conversations we've had, I am very optimistic that our partners at city, schools, others will step up and join this, whether they've made comments on the news, Mr. Chair, or in other places. I look forward to seeing the results of those meetings. And as you said, Sheriff McNeil, fleshing out this plan as we move forward. But I think this is the right posture and truly appreciate the effort and look forward to working on this. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, do we have a motion?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll make a motion for option 2.
We have a motion for option 2.
With funding, just since that was a point of question earlier, with the funding broke down between the 5 partners. Thank you.
Very good. We have a motion. Okay, on point to the motion, Commissioner Vice Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Thank you for your motion. I think I also agree that's the direction we should be moving in. The one caveat to it is I'm guessing that you're talking about us coming in at the $70,000 level that the sheriff proposed, correct?
That's what she said.
That's why I added that on with funding from the others. Now,
right.
I guess I would say if we don't see our partners, stepping up at the same level, if they can't or are inclined to go a different direction, I'd like to see this come back and we can have that conversation again.
That's all I was going to ask. If you could add to your motion as an amendment that if any one partner does not come back, that this agenda item be brought back with the consideration of not just us increasing, but those partners who do join in, splitting the costs amongst us all. Mr. Sheriff, is that amenable? I mean, if one partner does not come back, I don't think that we should foot the whole thing. I'm willing to if we have to, but to have a discussion about how maybe we can split it amongst 4, 3, whatever it is, I'll be willing to do over a 2-year period. The second part I was going to ask, and maybe this could be worked out then in the agenda item, is it too early to talk about measurements of success? And I know you love that. Measurements of success of the council. I was listening to what Dr. Williams was talking about, and how do we make sure that that the funding of programs that we're doing, whether it be CHSP, this funding, this program, or whatever, are really catching the kids and really successful in a way. So do we talk about that in this agenda item coming back being the measurement of success? And I talked to Dr. Williams a second. One of the problems he brought up, and I see it as well, is that some programs are summer programs, some programs are during the year, but what you find is the most effective programs are the ones that are year round. So do we talk about that in this agenda item that comes back, what that measurement of success looks like? And then finally, when we bring it back, we talk about the measurement of success, we talk about, if we have to increase the funding, do we also then discuss terms? So are we talking about just an annual year-to-year thing? I remember when we did the Carney Center, I believe we were in for a 2-year period or so, was it? I think it was, or something like that.
5.
It was 5-year period. That's what, five, right?
That was for facilities, though.
Yes, for facilities. But even CHSP, or we have a 2-year contracts on those types of things. So do we talk about, do we commit to this for 2 years and then have it come back to see one, measurements of success, and then see if it has funding that it can suffice on its own. This is giving a little more definition than to the agenda item. I'm wanting to see if you want that kind of specificity, or would you rather for staff just to work it out? But I kind of want to throw some of that in there. So can you speak to which one of those amendments you could accept in your motion? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I will say this, and if any of my other colleagues want to add on or ask questions, tweak this, we can keep working on the motion as we go, but you've brought up some good points. So First, while I am hard pressed to think of this initiative really working if any one of our partners, and let's be clear, primarily city, county, and schools, did not participate. All three of us have got to step up. So I am optimistic. I very much hope that. But to your point, I will frame this more as a motion in a second to save you, getting the exact motion language right now as we talk through this. But I think it should be brought back with a report on, what the status is from the other partners and for consideration for additional funding if that's necessary or in some breakdown with others. But I absolutely believe that it should be and hopefully will be covered by others. As for the measurements, metrics, yes, sir, I do like my measurements and metrics. As Dr. Williams said, that is the only way that we can ensure the programs are working. And I like what you said, sir, about more real-time measurements. We can't wait a year or 2 years to see if a program's working. To the point I made earlier about the timing, we are going to see a different set of measurements and data and metrics from our CHSP process than we have ever seen in the history of that program. We will start seeing needs assessment and other things from Children's Service Council. So we're going to have a lot more data. But that piece, Mr. Vice Chair, I would guess that we need to leave it to this, to the council to look at that, bring back recommendations. And if we had mid-year recommendations, that would be fantastic. If we could move more quickly, that would be great. But I wouldn't want to load that up right now. Let's let them talk about that. Your third point on the multi-year funding. I think that is a good point. My hope is this council, and I believe, hits the ground running, has some recommendations, perhaps has other funding, as Sheriff has indicated, and maybe some parts of it start folding into Children's Service Council or others. We don't know what this looks like, right? So, Mr. County Administrator, it seems that if we're working through with the partners and getting this squared away in the next couple months, hopefully quickly, we would have time in the FY23 budget process to bring back, to include any funding for next year, if we need to. Of course, we can do it out of cycle as we're doing it right now, but we could fold that into our FY23 as late as June or July. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we would, obviously, this item was strictly for the purposes of discussing the broad framework of the structure. Once you all determine that, either way, an item was coming back to you to discuss budget and all of the other implications. So, that will follow this. And to answer your question specifically, Commissioner Dozier, we would contemplate this if that was the direction you took tonight in the upcoming budget process as well.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, does that satisfy? Because we need a little more information before we can decide if it's multi-year. So we let that item come back, and then, as County Administrator said, it's going to get folded into the 2023 budget cycle if needed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I just think we have to be prepared to understand, like, something like this may take 2-3 years before we can take our hands off of it. So I don't want any of us to think that this may be just a one-year thing. And I think our partners will be just as committed if we have to go in that direction. So, but everything you said, I appreciate the ones that the way you addressed it, and I'm okay with everything. Okay. Thank you.
Well, the sheriff didn't ask for multi-year. The sheriff asked for 1 year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I will restate the motion for the record just to get clarity here. It is significant. I don't want to admit there's a lot of funding out there to start this. Could help us access other grants, other things like that. So that is significant here. So the motion is for option 2, with the assumption that, in the hope that our partners will split the cost by partners. And in that agenda item, when it comes back, if any one partner decides not to contribute or not to contribute the full amount, the board will take up that issue at that time for discussion. A second, good?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
All right.
Thank you.
That's not the most political posture of a motion. tell the other 4 people, if y'all wimp out, and if you're not all in, don't worry about it. We're going to carry your weight.
We got to be all in.
We have of our community 5 people to participate. And for us to announce, don't worry about it, we got you, if you don't come through. I don't like the posture of the motion. I think we should take that part off and allow those persons to step forward for the $70,000. Otherwise, why are we going to trouble them? Leave them alone. Let's just write the check and foot it, because that's what we just said we're going to do if they don't come through.
Mr. Chair,
I
respectfully.
don't want to promise to carry their water for them and then say we're all in, and everybody show up to the photo op that we all in, except we wrote the check.
Mr. Chair, respectfully, that is, if that's what you heard, that is absolutely not what I meant. I assume, I hope, I believe all 5 partners will step up, because all of us have said this is an issue. We've all focused on these issues, and I can't imagine a reason why the city wouldn't step up for this. We've heard Commissioner Richard, Mayor Pro Tem, others. However, to the Vice Chair's point, we want to contemplate that because this is so important. So no, that is the first step, and I assume they will step up.
All right. I don't like the motion, but nevertheless, Commissioner Welch, Cummings, and Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe, please, I beg your pardon for my confusion on some of these issues. I'm inclined to support the sheriff's request. My concerns, well, let me clarify my confusions first. Number one, it says in here that the sheriff is assigned appointment of CSMB executive director in the deliverables section. So I think there was some confusion about that earlier. And then the cost, it's $70,000 a year, or is it $150,000 to $200,000 a year? If you could provide some clarity on that. A third one, Mr. County Administrator,
Sure.
also, as I look at it, it says that the steering committee will be appointed by the executive director from a list of agencies, and then there's 37 at a minimum stakeholders that we're trying to please. So if you can answer those 3 questions for me, then I'll continue my comments in furtherance.
Sure, let me give it a shot. First of all, this item, again, as you know, I just need to restate, came to you all based on your direction to establish a commission on the status of men and boys. At that time, a lot of, like the status of commission on women and girls was said. So at that time, we started to structure this item based on that structure. Very simply, since that time, and as we were writing this item, we received a more specific proposal from the sheriff's office, which contemplated a different structure. So again, that's what's presented here, and we can talk about that different structure. It essentially contemplates a budget. The latest budget received from the sheriff's department is $350,000 a year, and it contemplates funding partnerships, again, which we've talked about. And certainly based on, if the motion passes tonight, of course, we'll go pursue our partners and bring that information back to you all in terms of their readiness. You asked a question about specific to the sheriff's proposal about the appointment of the executive director, I believe was the next one. Let me just defer to Alan on that one. I know he's got a level of specificity on that.
Yeah, and I think what you're referring to, Commissioner, is in the attachment of the deliverables. The appointment of the director is from the sheriff. And that was the assumption that we made in drafting the item, was that the person would be housed within the sheriff's office for payroll, et cetera, but based on their deliverable under 7, the appointment is made by the sheriff.
Correct. So then I believe the sheriff said earlier that was not what he understood. He thought we were going to be involved in that decision. We're not involved in that decision, according to the way this is designed. It says that the sheriff gets that deliverable. It's a little bit confusing. My bigger concern also is it says Leon County government is represented on the steering committee, but it doesn't say who, it doesn't say how, it doesn't say if we each get a pick. It's not like the Committee on the Status of Women and Girls where we would get a pick. So I think that's problematic. The big picture concern for me, Sheriff, is this thing looks like a big bureaucratic entity. And to Commissioner Dozier's point, my concern is outcomes. I want to know, is this thing going to be agile enough to change outcomes? what kind of product are we going to get out of this? What kind of return on the investment? I think what we don't need is another bureaucratic entity that does not solve the problem, it may try to solve the problem, it may have the best of intentions, but because it's too big to steer, it can't fundamentally get the job done. So that concerns me as I look at the deliverables. I think we've already got confusion about who's in charge of what or who's responsible for making what assignment. So that concerns me as we move on down the road. I'm fine moving with you on this and my colleagues. I just want to iterate. I want us to be effective. I want this to really move the needle. I want this to have positive outcomes. And I give you all the benefit of the doubt. I know that your heart's in the right place. I know that your feet are on the street and you really want to fix these statistics that we have. I think your Anatomy of a Homicide project laid it bare. We know where the problems are, and now we know where we got to target our resources to try and fix those problems. But I want to make sure that we establish an infrastructure that can actually do that. It's one thing to get together and have 45 people around a table talking about the problems, but I think it's going to be hard to get 45 people to figure out how to solve them. And that concerns me. So I'll support the motion. I think I'm okay moving with that. I think the return on investment could be high. And I not speaking for the county administrator, but I think that the smaller style of the Committee on Status Women and Girls may provide a little more agility in terms of actually trying to steer the thing in the right direction. But maybe there's a comfortable balance at some point when we come back with it. So thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Ron, and y'all staff. I know you do a lot of work on these data points, and I know you guys are analytical and granular about it, and I think that is the right approach. I just want to make sure that we maintain a level of ability to pivot to actually impact outcomes. So I'll support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Welch. And I think that to the point that you made on outcome measure, with the exception of noting have murders gone down, crimes gone down, outcomes, very difficult to say what is success. If it went down by 10%, 30, I don't know. So we're looking for a guarantee on something to measure something, which maybe Dr. Bloomberg is in his expertise to know what is success. That's something that we'll be looking at down the road. I appreciate Dr. Williams' comments for measurement, Dr. Bloomberg, his guaranteed measurement. And it seems that he's all in, and that's a good feeling to know that the criminology unit from Florida State is also going to be at the table. Commissioner Cummings.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just initially, again, echo the sentiments of my fellow commissioners in thanking the sheriff and Dr. Williams and the other speakers that have appeared tonight on this particular issue. That's just a very, very serious issue. I thank the sheriff for his dedication, and he's just very passionate about this issue. I thank him for the clarification that he's given us in his anatomy report of a homicide. My initial thoughts about this, Mr. Chair, in reading the report from our county administrator and reviewing the sheriff's proposal, was that time is of the essence. Our young men are dying. And if we saw the report in January, they're dying in high numbers. And my initial reaction was, why reinvent the wheel? We've got the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. We've got the administrative structure in place. Why not utilize that structure, even recognizing that there are some unique issues and situations as it deals with our young men and as it deals with gun violence. that we don't necessarily see as we analyze the status of women and girls. And so because of what I felt it was the urgency of trying to get a handle so that we can save the lives of our children, I felt that structure could be massaged a little so that we could hit the ground running. And I just want to make it clear, Mr. Chair, that money was not an issue or option for me. We can't put a price tag on the lives of our children. However, listening to the discussion, listening to the sheriff and getting some clarification on item, I do not have a major problem in supporting the sheriff's proposal. I recognize that, it's just going to take time, perhaps even if we adopted the same structure as the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, it would still take some time as well. And recognize we didn't get here overnight. This is something that's been occurring in our community to the point where it has festered, and perhaps it will pay off to take a little bit more time and to study it and to massage it and be meticulous about the actions and the areas that the council wants to engage in so that we can make a positive difference in the lives of our children, and we can put a stop to a lot of the gun violence. So I don't have a problem with supporting the sheriff's initiative, and I believe whether we adopt option one or option two, if we are taking any steps to quell the adverse effects that's occurring in our communities and the young lives that are being snatched out, I think if we can save one life by the creation of this commission on the status of boys and men, I believe we will have done a service to some family. Because when you lose the life of your child, of an individual, of a young man, it doesn't just affect that family. It has a ripple effect in the community with family and friends. So I appreciate the sheriff bringing this forward. I appreciate the staff in their recommendations, Mr. Chair, and I will support the initiative.
Very good. Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, just a couple of questions on clarification. If it's out of cycle, if this funding occurs out of regular budget cycle, does it come from the general fund? Mr. Administrator.
It would be contemplated based on this action tonight, it would come from general fund contingency.
Okay, and then moving forward, would it be a separate line item in the budget, like we've talked about? A one-year shot is not going to yield the results we're looking for.
Sure. Moving forward, we would contemplate it as a discrete budget item.
Okay, and it would not occur through distribution in the CHSP group?
No, it would be a separate line item.
Yeah, Sheriff McNeil, I can't agree with my colleagues anymore, particularly when you talk about 83% of those kids were either expelled or sent to an alternative school. If you only concentrated on those 83, your numbers would be drastically reduced. But how do we measure that? And how do we inspect kind of what we expect? And unfortunately, I think sometimes that can take longer than just a 1 or 2 year shot at it. I'm sure you guys would agree. But I can't think of better partners than the ones you've listed because of the stake that they have in the game, as far as that is concerned, for not only not only public safety, but safety in our schools and on our streets and in our homes. So each year when we receive an initial budget plan, it will have a $70,000 tag.
That will be presented for your consideration each year during the budget process.
Now, I too want to be very careful about I think Commissioner Dozier mentioned this, over promising and under delivering. So, I don't want to get $70,000 worth of bang out of our bucks. But the group of 5, if we can lock down those commitments, I think it's kind of essential to making this thing work. All in, to quote my sheriff. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I want to thank you for the energies that you have shared in this initiative. We want to thank you for lending to this commission your eyes, your experiences in life, and certainly it's been through your sensitivities that has helped to move the ball this far along. So we thank you for putting a shoulder on this thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I want to go back to Commissioner Dozier, excellent motion and even the breakdown of the amendments that I asked for. I thought you were very thorough in that as well. I think that as we look at this, the one question I had was, our contingency is $250,000, correct?
It's 200. It's 200 a year, and I think we have about 190 left. I'm sorry.
All right, 200. We have not accessed any of that contingency, correct?
I think we've accessed about 20,000 so far this year.
20,000. So just if we did this, well, that goes to another question. This is not necessarily the beginning of a fiscal year, Mr. Sheriff. I know it's the 70 number would be an annual ask. Would this year, with us starting now, would you be asking all partners to give the 70 now and look into their budget for the future year, or would it be prorated based off of where we are in the fiscal year? Because I'm thinking, anybody that you bring on, if they're whatever they're making, it would be a little less. So are we talking about, even though we're not at the beginning of a year, we're still talking about 70 now, Mr. Sheriff? I'm sorry.
Vice Chair has asked a question of you, Sheriff, if you don't mind.
The notion here is obviously that we be asking for $70,000 from the 5 entities.
Yes,
We believe that to be primarily seed monies.
Yes, sir.
The goal that we have is to reach out, and we already have commitments from others that say that they will come in outside public-private partnerships to come in and assist us with this. So our belief is that after a year's period of time with grants and other partners, that we will wean ourselves from all 5 entities and start to do this with dollars that we generate from grants and other resources.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. As I spoke before about Dr. Williams' reference to matrices, I don't just think it's helpful as we sit here today, but Commissioner Dozier, you pointed this out too, when he's talking about month to month. I think it breaks it down even further than what we do now. Maybe that's a conversation when we have that CHSP stuff come back. Do we talk about how maybe we build in a more real-time and current breakdown of those matrices, and so we can review if we want to ask for it in that month, because the stuff you asked for was pretty thorough, Dr. Williams, and we should be able to access it, right? We should be able from our partners, but creating that system might be something that we want to look at in other places too. So I appreciate that comment. I thought we had a wide range of representatives. We had our sheriff. Very, very proud of the fact that we were represented well by African American males, which is the target, which is the highest rate in the report that came back. We had our sheriff, we had Dr. Williams, we had Pastor Ferguson, so we had clergy, we had Mr. Whitfield, we also had Mr. Sims, who walked on water back to his seat. So I was proud of the fact that we were represented well, and even our FSU representative, to know that you guys are going to come in and partner and provide that help. Absolutely amazing to know that we're building such a robust program, and so many partners are going to be involved. We talk about the All-In initiative and what we need. It really centers upon everybody getting involved. This is the type of thing that we need at the top level, but I would ask that as the community listens and we lead by example of everybody jumping in and really trying to tackle this hurdle, I ask that our citizens also see it and follow suit. In every community, every piece of our community from north, south, east, west, follow the example and jump in here with us and help us to do this. Mr. Whitfield had a conversation with him. He said, you need people on the council who aren't afraid to walk down Basin Street. You need people on the council who aren't afraid to walk down Alabama Street. My argument is there shouldn't be an absolute person. There shouldn't be one person in this community that's afraid of walking down any of those streets, because we're all neighbors. Maybe separated by a couple miles, but we're all neighbors. And so I'm looking for those representatives too. I think he made an excellent point with that. Commissioner Dozier brought up the point. We talk about return on investment. Right now we're paying $25,000 a year per inmate. The sheriff's asked us for $70,000 for a program that could decrease I would imagine, Sheriff, that one of the things that you would want out of this committee as an outcome out of this is that we would decrease our jail population, increase crime within the city county area. Just the return on investment on $70,000 would be 3 inmates. So if we were able to just decrease by those 3, I think we're doing a pretty good job. And that's just me just making up some stuff in my head. But I think I'm doing the math the right way. We did the math. $30 million that we're spending on our jail. Sheriff's asking us for $70,000 and other partners as well. I think when you balance the two, when you think about the return on investment and how we can win, this is a simple ask that we should all go with and every partner should participate in. It should come back, and I'm be very frank. If we had to foot the whole bill, I'm here willing to do the whole 350. I know for sure that we won't have to foot the whole bill because the sheriff has said that he is into this as well. So I'm not afraid of thinking that that's something that we would have to do. But again, when you think about the return on investment, you think about how important this is for our community, I'm willing to take those kind of measures to get to where we're trying to go. This is very important, very crucial for our community. I don't think when you sit back and think about it, we can put a number on the investment we make in our inmates in our detention facility. But can you put and maybe folks from my criminology department or Dr. Williams or even the sheriff, when a young man or a young woman loses their life, can you put a number attached to that? Can you put a price to how much does that cost a family? How much does that cost a community when a young person loses their life? It's limitless in my opinion, but if you could put something on it, again, if we just save just one, I think it's worth whatever we're going to invest. And so I say we push forward with this thing. I'm so glad the commission is in support of it, but I'm going to push you a step further in saying that I think I'm like Commissioner Dozier. I'm very optimistic that all of our partners is going to jump on it and is going to invest in this thing. But if they do not, I'm one right here to say it, that I'm still in, because I think it's that important for our community. Mr. Sheriff, I had a conversation with you, and I want to bring out some things that we talked about. I think the programs that we have right now, let's say like the City's Tempo program and others, I think when you think about who really participates in those programs, there weren't people like my biological mother who was, on drugs, drinking, really out in the streets and wasn't really able to pay me that much attention and really get me into things. It was people like my aunt who was a college graduate trying to do it on her own, but at the same time was pushing me to get in different programs. What I say about it is I say that it's our at risk, but it's not the most at risk. One thing I'm wondering is, and I had this conversation with the sheriff, how do we get to that most at risk? How do we build a system where we're able to identify that most at risk? With those kind of kids, in most cases, you have to go get them. The parents, they're not going to come to you. The parents aren't going to come to you. You have to go get them. And as Mr. Whitfield said very, very passionately, you got to create a hell of a deal for them to want to be involved. It got to be something that they can grab onto, see a future in, and actually feel like they're going to be successful and make a way for themselves and sometimes even their families. Because a lot of these kids are providing for a family. Mr. Williams brought up to me, he said, in these summer programs, when the kids are working and getting paid, what you find out is some of these kids are the breadwinners in their homes for that summer program, but then it goes away. Well, then who's the breadwinner then? You know, so this is a really complex problem. I think we have to dive in. I think we really have to be committed to in order for us to really solve the problem or really address the problem that we're trying to address. And frankly, Mr. Sheriff, I don't care who's supervising, over hiring the executive director and the staff, as long as it's effective, as long as it's something that we can look at those measurables and say we move the needle. I could care less about who gets the credit, who's running the program, who's managing the program. I just want something that we spent money on and we got results back from. That's all I'm asking. The final thing that I'll ask is if Mr. Administrator, as we look at, because Commissioner Dozier said she talked about letting the commission create the matrices and stuff like that. Or you said we were talking about creating the matrices and see what success would look like. I won't put words in my mouth, but what I understood you to say was, let's give them, the commission, once it's created, a whack to tell us, a chance to tell us what they want that to look like and let them build that. Is that what you meant by that, or did I miss out on that?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I didn't go into it too much. I think that is something, particularly that the subgroups, our experts involved, criminology, others could reflect on. And I will just make this comment as to why I'm not really thinking we need to deliberate on that at the commission level right now. For example, with our homeless service providers and emergency service providers, they may participate in the Homeless Information Service Network, or HMIS. I'm not getting that acronym right. But that is secure information. We can't have access to that in a real time. So what data we can get, how to track, that's some deep questions. And there's some legal and some privacy issues and other things. So I would feel more comfortable if that is something, it is obviously something that we all want to focus on, but it is something that we need others to weigh in on to see what the best data set is, how best to capture that, and what data could we have more frequently, and data we maybe have to wait on. Is that get your question?
Yes,
okay.
yes. So I don't need you for that, Mr. Administrator. The thing I do is to address, Commissioner Welch talked about the construction of the actual committee. Mr. Administrator, I'm guessing that will come back with the, that will come back in the agenda item. It's not necessarily contemplated here, but that would be discussed amongst the partners, Mr. Administrator?
Yes, that'll come back to you.
Okay. Last thing I'll say is, as a young kid, I remember going to school, and I was walking to school, and I found this weightlifting glove. And I get to school, and this kid I just had one. He was obsessed with the glove. His mom had gave him $50 that day for our school pictures. I hustled that kid after $50 that day, went back home, gave it to my mom, and it paid a bill. Mr. Sheriff, please don't arrest me. I was 6, 7 years old. It paid a bill for my mom that day. I went back to school the next day. That same kid, while I paid a bill, got in big trouble because all he had to show was a weightlifting glove. That's the kind of decisions that you're making. That's the kind of hustle kids are doing in schools to make sure that they're trying to help their families. When you talk about success of a program, that same kid who's going to hustle out for a weightlifting glove for $50 is making way for his family, is going to grow up and have to make a bigger way for his family. As he gets older, the responsibility grows on that child. The responsibility to provide grows on that child. And $50 doesn't make it happen. I was 7 when I did that. $50 doesn't make it happen when you're 14, 15, 16. It doesn't make it happen when you got to help. And so you turn to other avenues. When there's nobody at home, when there's nobody to guide you, when there's nobody to tell you right from wrong, you turn to the people that you know. And sometimes those are the wrong influences. Sometimes those wrong influences don't even mean to be the wrong influences. Because sometimes they want to do best by the child, but they're caught up in a certain light. Who's going to help that kid who's providing from the time he's 7 to the time he gets out of the house. I'm hoping that this kind of committee can answer those questions and catch that kid when he's 7 and making that hustle to tell him there's a different kind of way. But not only help that kid, but figure out a way to dig into the home to talk to that mother, father, whoever's in there about how they can better themselves and improve their situations to move up from the level of poverty to say lower middle class, and every generation moves up and moves up and moves up. Because what we're calling it now is sometimes is a perpetuation of poverty because that's all these children have an opportunity to see. So I'm very hopeful for what's going to happen, and maybe I'm putting too much responsibility on it because we're talking about crime, but crime, you know, and violent crime, if you can solve that, I think it creates a way for us to solve other things as well. I don't just think this is just about crime. I think it's bigger than that. So, Mr. Sheriff, I thank you for bringing it to us. I'm glad we're going to move forward with it. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for the length of my comments, but you're right. I am very passionate about it. If it wasn't for a group like this, if it wasn't for people who are going to be on this commission, I very well might not be sitting in this seat today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's understandable. Thank you, commissioners, for your labors. We thank the sheriff. This is a historic vote tonight for Leon County, a wonderful beginning with Florida State University, and for our Leon County Sheriff. I believe history will note and be kind to Sheriff Walt McNeil for his effort to prevent, to stop violent crimes, his angle and desire to not just house those who are locked up, but to prevent that from occurring is noble. I want to note that as a body, this commission, we're not stingy. This community is not stingy with respect to the dollars that we support for public safety. And I want to just ask our county administrator, what is the dollar value that of our ad valorem taxes that we actually process and invest in public safety?
Mr. Chairman, the sheriff's budget is, last count, $85 million a year. It estimates to, or it's the equivalent of over half of all property taxes collected.
Okay. So to those persons who would simply say that, well, $350,000 is not a lot for this or that, I want you all to know that over half of our ad valorem taxes, over half, go to the sheriff for purposes of public safety. So we ain't stingy, and it ain't like we half-stepping. Most of our money goes there, but we take an additional stride toward freedom. That was a book Martin Luther King wrote, a title, Stride Toward Freedom. And the freedom from violence and negative results is an additional effort that we're investing because we put money already. And it reflects our value to stay safe. The comment by Mr. Whitfield Leland and the challenge of elected officials to have the courage to walk down Basin Street or walk down Alabama Street really is a striking one. But Dr. Williams, it occurs to me, and Dean Bloomberg, that the more striking issue is in America, public policy is made in a reverse manner when it comes to criminal justice and policing. And it's not whether elected officials feel safe going down Basin or Alabama. The legislature makes policies out of the fear of when people from Basin Street and Alabama Street walk down their neighborhoods. That's the hell of a fix and perception of what is occurring in our community across America. Is far more people afraid of men from Basin Street in their community. And that fear is what drives public policy. And Sheriff McNeil is to be commended because he knows that. And he's here to ask us to walk with him. And we will. Commissioners, we've labored on this and we've gnawed on this bone. There's we're going to have other times to reach in and talk further. But Commissioner Dozier has made a motion. County Attorney, there's no need to restate it. You captured that, the motion. In hearing that motion, we've all weighed in. Hearing no other comments, those in favor of Commissioner Dozier's motion, seconded by the Vice Chairman, please say aye. Aye. It passes unanimously. We thank you. We take a recess for 15 minutes. We'll be back at 6. Thank you.